Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm the program director here at the Scholar. We're delighted you're here with us. We hope you enjoyed tonight's event with the one and only #1 New York Times bestselling author, Ruth Ware. Before we get started tonight, I have just a few housekeeping notes. One, we have tickets available for many exciting events we have planned for the summer, including appearances from Chris Whitaker, that's actually tomorrow, Joe Piazza, Hannah Nicole Mayer, and we are almost ready to announce the Harrisburg Book Festival this fall. Please grab an event postcard as you leave and stay tuned to our social media pages and newsletter so that you never miss an upcoming author appearance or the festival announcement. Second, you have in your hands a signed copy of The Woman in Suite 11 by Ruth Ware. If you'd like to get your copy personalized, we'll be having a post-event signing in our Rare Books building, so that's going to be out the doors here and then to the left. You may bring one outside book into the signing line. Otherwise, any other copies that you bring into the signing line must be purchased from the bookstore. Thanks in advance for your understanding and your support of indies. Lastly, unfortunately, if you haven't heard the news, Sarah Pekkanen had a last-minute family emergency, and she won't be joining us this evening. We're wishing Sarah the best, but our very own bookseller, Amanda Matta, will be stepping up to help moderate this event with Ruth, so thank you, Amanda. But now, I have the honor of introducing our speakers this evening. Of course, our interviewer is Amanda Matta. Amanda is a writer, royal commentator, and content creator who you may know from your social media feeds as Matta of Fact. She explores the intersection of royal history, media, and modern culture through her weekly newsletter, The Fascinator, and also produces and co-hosts the weekly podcast, Off With Their Headlines. Amanda holds degrees in art history and arts administration and has built a career making complex stories both compelling and accessible. She lives in central Pennsylvania with her fiancé and is currently writing her first book. Once again, a special thank you to Amanda for stepping up tonight. Can we give Amanda just one more round of applause for stepping up in a pinch? And of course, our featured author tonight is Ruth Ware. Ruth worked as a waitress, a bookseller, a teacher of English as a foreign language, and a press officer before settling down as a full-time writer. She now lives with her family in Sussex on the south coast of England. She is the #1 New York Times and Globe and Mail best-selling author of In a Dark, Dark Wood, The Woman in Cabin 10, The Lion Game, The Death of Mrs. Westaway, The Turn of the Key, One by One, The It Girl, 0 Days, One Perfect Couple, and The Woman in Suite 11. Of course, we're here to discuss Ruth's new book, The Woman in Suite 11, which is the follow-up to her #1 multi-million copy mega hit, The Woman in Cabin 10. She's been called diabolically clever and the Agatha Christie of our generation, end quote. Once again, it's an honor and a thrill to welcome Ruth Ware back to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. So without further ado, please join me in giving Amanda and Ruth a very warm Harrisburg welcome.
Hello again, everybody. I think I greeted all of you at the door. Thank you so much for coming out, and thank you, Ruth, for stopping in Harrisburg once again on your book tour. We're so excited to have you.
Oh my gosh, it's just my absolute pleasure to be here. But I think I speak for everyone when I say, should we just scrap the event and talk royal gossip all night?
Please. So you're from Sussex. You have a duchess.
I know. They don't live there, sadly.
No, but I'm so excited to talk about this book with you. This is your 10th book, and it's been almost 10 years since The Woman in Cabin 10. So what made you want to write a sequel? Did you really have people writing into you demanding more of Lo's story?
I mean, I really did. I wouldn't say it's the book that I've had the most correspondence about. That one is probably The Turn of the Key, for reasons that anybody who's read it may appreciate. It has an ending which people have strong feelings about, and I have had a lot of correspondence about. But it is, it's probably the book that I've had the most questions about, both, on social media and at events. People always want to know, what did Lo do next? How did it turn out? And I always said I would never write a sequel to any of my books, because I think the thing is, my characters tend to be just regular, ordinary people. They're not police officers, they're not forensic scientists. So it's quite hard to come up with a reason why they would keep sort of stumbling into murders and criminal enterprises. You can end up sort of having that slight Murder, She Wrote effect, where every time Jessica Fletcher opens her front door, there's like another littering of corpses in Cabot Cove. And I adore Murder, She Wrote. It's one of my favourite shows, but that's not quite the kind of books that I write. And the other reason, which I think speaks to the amount of time it took me to come back to Lo's story, is that I always feel like my poor characters just deserve a bit of a rest after everything that I put them through. And especially Lo in Cabin 10, I threw everything but the kitchen sink at that poor woman. Like, there is not a moment that she has to just sit down, gather her thoughts, have a little bit of a rest. She's constantly being kind of, menaced, physically threatened, exhausted, kept up at night. So I think I just felt strongly that after everything that had happened to her, Lo would want to just have a quiet life, go off to New York with her boyfriend, and I should leave her well enough alone. But over the years, people kept saying, kept asking, kept wanting to know what happened next. And I found myself wondering the same thing. And the wondering kind of turned into pondering, and the pondering kind of turned into plotting, and eventually the plotting turned into a book that I knew I really, really wanted to write. And I think part of the reason I wanted to write it was because it had been enough time since the events in Cabin 10 that I felt Lo would have changed a little bit, grown a little bit, become a little bit of a different person. And I kind of wanted to find out who that new person was.
So we'll come back to Lo as a character in just a minute, but for those who have read Cabin 10 or maybe haven't, should they reread it before diving into Sweet 11? Is that like required reading for the sequel?
I wouldn't say it's required. So Sweet 11 is a standalone mystery in terms of you don't have to have read Cabin 10 to understand the plot, to solve the mystery, to figure out what's going on. Hopefully any information that you need to know from that book is sort of seeded in through Sweet 11. But there is a lot in there that I put in there for the readers of Cabin 10. There's little Easter eggs, there's characters reappearing. So I think if you want to reread Cabin 10, it will probably make Sweet 11 more rewarding.
It's good to know. So where do we link back up with Lo? You said you wanted to give her a bit of a break, but clearly you're dragging her back into your thrilling, twisty plots. So where do we catch up with her? How does this story kind of begin?
So we meet Lo almost 10 years on from the events in Cabin 10, and she is living in New York with her now husband, Judah, who is her boyfriend in Cabin 10. She's got 2 small kids. She's taken a bit of time out from from her career in journalism to help raise her kids. And of course, there's been the pandemic. So she's kind of re-entering travel journalism in a slightly different landscape to the one that she left. She's trying to get back on the horse career-wise. She's applying for jobs, but she's not having a huge amount of success. So when she gets this invitation out of the blue to say, would you like to come and attend the opening of this luxury hotel in Switzerland, the Hotel du Lac, she jumps at the chance. But going to the hotel opening is only part of it, because the hotel is owned by this famously reclusive billionaire, Marcus Leidmann, who is this Belgian businessman. And Lo is desperately hoping that she will be able to snag an interview with Marcus, because this would be a huge coup. He is unfortunately really hard to pin down. So when Lo gets a call in the middle of the night saying, would come to Marcus's suite 11 in the hotel, she knows that she has to seize this opportunity because it might not come again.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? So she rocks up to his suite in the middle of the night, and what she finds there is a spoiler. So I won't tell you anything more about that, apart from to say that it is, because it's one of my novels, it goes hideously wrong. So
Fair enough. So has Lo kind of learned from her past experiences? Is she dealing with being back in this kind of world where there's dangerous men all around her well, would you say? Or is that also a spoiler?
The thing about Lo is that one of her characteristics that I love the most is that she does have a kind of slight savior complex, I would say. She's one of those people that is constitutionally unable to walk away from someone else in trouble. And that was the case in The Woman in Cabin 10. It's the case in The Woman in Suite 11. And I think it's one of her best characteristics. She is someone who cares really deeply about other people, who wants them to be okay. And when she sees an injustice or a problem that she thinks she can solve, she is not someone who can simply say, okay, right, there's none of my business. I would be the first to say, not my circus, not my monkeys, I'm off, goodbye. But Lo cannot do that. She can't leave well enough alone. And she is still very much that person. But what is different in Suite 11 is that she now has kids. And so she's very aware that in Cabin 10, her first responsibility is to her own safety. In Suite 11, she's aware of the fact that her first responsibility is to her kids and to get back for her kids. So that, for her, in a way, makes the stakes much, much higher.
I love that you're talking about her as if she's a real person. How much of her story do you feel that you had a hand in, and how much is just you sitting back and letting your character kind of steer the ship, pun intended?
Wow, it's a really good question. I guess obviously, like on a basic level, I know that Lo doesn't exist outside of my own head. So everything that she is, I created. But my characters do feel incredibly real to me and incredibly different from me in many ways. It is, in some ways, it is a bit like having children, in that you can sort of I recognize bits of myself in my characters. None of them are autobiographical. I don't put other people in my books, and I don't put myself in my books. But there are, I think, what makes a character feel real and feel three-dimensional very often is the parts of yourself that you put into it as a writer. And that's true of Lo, it's true of all my characters, even the kind of, really evil and reprehensible ones. They've all got a tiny little corner of me in it. But yeah, how much of it, I guess there comes a point when you've sort of created this kind of Frankenstein zombie that you've sort of stitched together from different parts, and that that Frankenstein takes on sounds very weird. I don't know where this metaphor has gone, but they become sort of real and three-dimensional to you and start doing stuff that was not what you expected, was not necessarily what you wanted. And that certainly happened in Cabin 10. The ending of that book is written the way it is because of the way certain characters in the book decided to act. It was not what I'd planned. It was not what I'd intended. It made my life very difficult because I had to go back and replot to make the ending that subsequently happened be possible. And it was, to a lesser extent, true in Suite 11. There were things when I got to it where the characters did not act in the way I had expected them to, but I had to be true to the people that I'd created.
So you would be Dr. Frankenstein in that analogy, just to be clear.
I guess I would, yes.
And across all of your books, your protagonists, I think that's what people love about them. They're not perfect. They're not perfectly suited to be in the situations they find themselves in. But they fight to get out of these situations, and in Lo's case, to kind of fight for other people in the story. What is it about women in general in those positions? It's almost the anti-damsel in distress. What about that narrative is so compelling to you that you keep returning to it?
This is turning into a bit of a therapy session, isn't it?
That's like the last one that's kind of emotionally hard-hitting. Spoiler.
You mean just like the idea of sort of women getting sort of solving their own...
Why don't you write about men?
Wow, this is asking the tough questions here. I guess, so a lot of what I write about is stuff that I feel strongly about, stuff that I feel anxious about, stuff that I wake up at 3 a.m. kind of preoccupied with. And also, I guess I feel like... I sort of have a responsibility to be truthful to the way that I see and have experienced the world. And that is, oddly enough, I get a fair number of emails criticising the amount of swearing in my books, and that is the response that I always give. That, you know, I'm a genre writer. I'm not a literary writer, but I still feel a responsibility to truthfully portray the world as I have experienced it and seen it. And in my experience, women of my age in a stressful situation do swear, so there's no point in glossing over that. We might as well be honest. But on a kind of larger scale, I guess that's what I'm trying to do on a sort of emotional level as well, is be truthful to the way that I have seen the world, I have experienced the world. And it's not that I would never write about a male character. Like, if a story came to me and it had a compelling male perspective that demanded to be in there, I would absolutely write that. I don't believe that any kind of perspective is off limits for a writer. But it's not my area of expertise, and I don't think I've finished saying what I feel it is like to be a woman in the 21st century. So until I've run out of stuff to say on that topic, I'm maybe not writing men.
That's all right. I love that. No, I'm here for it. So if you really are injecting your lived experience into your books, I have to ask you about all of these beautiful locations that you set them in. So your last book, One Perfect Couple, was on a beautiful island. You took us on a luxury cruise in Cabin 10, and now we're in the Swiss Alps. So please tell me you are getting to visit these places for research.
Well, here's where I have to eat my words, because do you know what? The one thing that I've never done out of all of my books, I have never still to this day been on a cruise. And when I started writing Cabin 10, one of the things I was most excited about when the idea came to me, I thought, oh, great, I can go on a cruise and write it off for tax purposes. And my kids were much smaller then, and I kept meaning to do it, and it just was never possible. Like, you know, I couldn't take the time off work, my husband couldn't take the time off work, we couldn't get childcare. So it just never happened. And then I finished writing the book and I thought, well, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs is never going to accept it as research once the book is published. So that ship has literally sailed. I have, however, been to the Swiss Alps. I haven't stayed in any hotels quite as fabulous as the one that Lo goes to. But one of the fun things about doing this job is that I do get to travel a lot. I do get to stay in some amazingly awesome hotels. I have to also say some less glamorous hotels. I have stayed in quite a few, with the view of the parking. There was an amazing one in Poland. I went to Warsaw, where instead of hotel toiletries, they had this enormous, 3-gallon container, chained to the wall of the shower, filled with what looked like washing up liquid. I don't know what it was. I decided not to use it, and that was it. There was no conditioner, no body wash. It was just this mysterious green goo. But the good thing is it's all amazing material for a thriller writer, and I think the reason that hotels make a great setting for a thriller, and part of the reason why I was really keen to use it in Suite 11, is because I think hotels are both where I have felt the most kind of pampered and taken care of, as someone who has a family who is not always super good at picking up after themselves. I have teenage kids. It's just the most magical thing to walk into your bedroom and find that someone else has made the bed, like a good fairy. It's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. But they're also one of the places where I felt the least safe. And there is something really kind of quite bizarre about the idea that you are sleeping in a room where literally dozens of other people have a key to get in. They could walk in at any time of the day or night. They could have a poke around in your belongings if they really wanted to. And there is nothing like waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of a scream echoing down the corridor outside and having that sudden heart-stopping moment of thinking that you're in your own bed and then realizing that you're in a strange place and you have no idea what is going on just outside the kind of 2 centimeters of wood that separates you from a complete stranger. And fortunately, so far anyway, touch wood, every time that has happened, it's become very quickly apparent that it's just a hen night or a bachelorette party having a good time and shrieking or whatever it is. But that is still that kind of heart-stopping moment where you wake up with your heart banging in your chest thinking, oh my God, there's somebody in the room. And then you realise there's not, it's fine, you're just in a hotel, but they are only feet away.
Yeah, those were always my favorite Agatha Christie mysteries, when you have the 10 strangers in a room all kind of being suspects and suspecting each other. I'm assuming those are influences for you. What else kind of forms your backbone of thrillers and suspense?
Oh my gosh, so many. Agatha Christie is obviously a perennial favorite, and I take huge inspiration from her plotting. I grew up reading Agatha Christie, and I think the thing that I find most satisfying about her books is the way she's really punctilious about dropping all of those clues, those breadcrumbs all the way through. And then finally, when you get to the end and the solution is kind of presented to you, the reaction that I always have with all of her books is, of course, that's the answer. I should have guessed, I should have realised. And I don't know if I always manage to do that, but that's the kind of pleasure that I strive to give with my books, is, to give people the clues that they need to solve the mystery. And that does sometimes mean that readers will get there ahead of the main character, and that's okay. I've made my peace with that. But yes, I love Daphne du Maurier. The Death of Mrs. Westaway was my kind of homage to Daphne du Maurier and her amazing kind of Cornish settings and, the stately homes and so on. I love Patricia Highsmith. I love so many contemporary writers like, Gillian Flynn and Lisa Jewell and Claire McIntosh and, Riley Sager, who I spoke with here a couple of years ago, is amazing. So, just one of the great things about the crime genre, I think, is that it is both hugely capacious. You can tackle almost any subject, any angle in crime, but it's also it's also incredibly exciting time to be writing crime. There are so many writers doing it brilliantly, and I think that makes everyone else kind of up their game.
And so you want to be fair to the reader then. You're not trying to trick them.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
yes.
yes to both. I am trying to trick them, but I also want to be fair to them. I think the reaction that always annoys me as a reader is when I get to, page 300 and whatever it is, and I think, well, I didn't guess the solution, but I had no chance of, because you didn't tell me that there was, I don't know, an identical twin or a passage from the boathouse or whatever thing it is we would have had to have known in order to have thought that was a plausible solution. And I think the genius of someone like Christie is that she's very clever about telling you that there is an identical twin, but in such a way that you somehow don't think it's an important clue. So yeah, it's not something that's easy to pull off, and I don't think I manage it all the time. But that's my favourite thing, is when you think, oh, of course, that was why she mentioned the passage from the boathouse. Now it all makes sense.
The twin is always a clue. So you mentioned then your characters sort of making their own decisions, but do you go into writing a book knowing who done it, knowing how the mystery plays out, or does that come to you in the process as well?
No, I almost, when I start writing, I almost always know. That's usually one of the few things that I do know. So I typically think about a book for quite a long time before I start writing it. So I think about the characters, I think about the settings, I think about their backstories, I sort of try and figure out who they are and what makes them tick. And the point when I know I'm ready to start writing is usually the point when I have worked out the who done it and the how done it. And that's partly because it gives me confidence. I feel like having an ending to aim for gives me the knowledge that I can finish this book, even if I don't know the way from A to B. Just having a B to aim for is a really important part of it. But I had an A point and a B point there, and I've completely forgotten what the other one was. Oh yes, no, that was the other thing I was going to say. The other reason why I don't start writing until I know the solution is because I want to be able to drop clues, conceal clues, put in red herrings, and it's very difficult to drop clues to the solution if you don't know the solution yourself. I know some writers manage to do it. Lisa Jewell, I believe, does, or she says she doesn't plot. I find that very hard to believe with some of her books because they're very intricate. So I think maybe she sort of subconsciously plots more than she lets on. But for me, I have to at least sort of know the final piece of the puzzle. And I can fill in the rest sort of just on vibes and figuring it out as I go along. But that sort of, that cornerstone has to be there. I guess it's sort of, I kind of think of it a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. Like you have to do the four corners first. And once you've got that, everything else you can just sort of work out as you go along.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm guessing you're a mystery reader. Do you enjoy thrillers in TV and film as well? Are you exclusively thriller?
I'm absolutely not exclusively thriller, no. I love all genres. And actually, I get sent so many crime and thriller books that I get really excited when I get sent books from outside. So I got sent Joe Hill's new book, King's Sorrow, a few months ago, which is horror. And I was like, this is so exciting. It's not a crime book. And I'm normally a really big scaredy cat. I don't typically read horror, but I was like, right, I'm definitely going to read this. It's really good, by the way. But no, I love film and TV. I find a lot of people are really snobby about watching TV. They sort of see it as a guilty pleasure, but I think story is story. And if you are, if you're getting inspiration from anywhere, it doesn't matter whether it's real life or, Hello Magazine or, something on Amazon Prime, it's all grist to the mill. So at the moment, I'm watching Murderbot on Apple, which is really good. That's not crime, I guess. Department Q on Netflix, which is crime, although I'm quite claustrophobic. Has anybody else here watched it? Yeah, few hands at the back. It's got this kind of subplot of this woman who's like trapped in a kind of hyperbaric chamber, and I'm finding that section so hard to watch. So I sort of keep like squinting at the description through like, is there going to be much about the hyperbaric chamber? So I don't know. People have told me it gets more of that content as it goes on, so I don't know if I'm going to finish it, but the rest of it's really good. It's all really good, but the bit with the hyperbaric chamber is too good, so.
Well, I had to ask that because I think there are going to be somehow people who have not yet read Cabin 10 being introduced to your work because you have a Netflix film adaptation coming out. So what can you share about that process, about the casting choices? Because there were some really cool choices made.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult because Netflix have sworn me to secrecy on so many amazing details, which so what I can tell you that it's coming out this autumn. They've confirmed that. The cast is amazing. Keira Knightley is low. I know, right? That was actually my reaction when my agent told me was more like, oh! And then I went, wait, the Keira Knightley? And she was like, yes, there's only one Ruth. There's not some other Keira Knightley actress out there impersonating her. Guy Pearce, that was my one regret about the production, was I didn't get to meet Guy Pearce, and I had a huge crush on him as a teenager. So it was probably for the best, because I might have behaved very unprofessionally and just kind of melted into a puddle of teenage hormones. Hannah Waddingham, Kaya Scodelario, David Ajay. There's the whole cast is amazing. Literally any of them could have been a headliner. So yeah, it's pretty. And I got to visit the set, which was really cool. So yeah,
that is so exciting. And in Suite 11, Lo actually, she sometimes references actors when she's describing other characters in the book. You name drop Donald Sutherland and Jeremy Strong. So are those people you were envisioning as these characters, and you're just like, yeah, I got to put the names in there? Is that how you kind of build some of these side characters?
Well, it's funny because I never kind of dream cast my novels. It's one of the questions that I get asked most. And I know like a lot of writers have a kind of, mood board of their novel, and they put up like actors who they think look like the characters. And I typically don't. And I find it really difficult when people say, like, who would play so-and-so, because it feels to me a bit like being asked, who would play your dad? Like, well, my dad's my dad. He's not like Harrison Ford or anything like that. So I don't sort of typically cast, but I do, I guess in the same way as you kind of sometimes reach for comparisons when you're describing people to a friend, you might say, well, he looks a bit like a low-budget Patrick Swayze or something like that. Occasionally it's just a fun shorthand to say, like, he looked like this, or he had, the hair of so-and-so, or whatever it is. So, yeah, the Marcus Leidmann is compared to Donald Sutherland, who sadly is not available to play him in any future adaptation. And yes, his son is compared to Jeremy Strong, who I think has such an expressive face, just kind of, a really interesting kind of non-classically handsome face, but one that is fascinating to watch, which is, I guess, what I was trying to get at with that comparison.
Okay. Well, we're going to open it up to audience questions, but before we do, I just have to ask, what's next for you, or is there nothing on the table and you're just going to be low and go off for 10 years and take a break and try to recover?
Yep, that's it. I'm 10 and I'm done. Sorry, guys. No, I'm writing another book, always. But normally I would be able to talk about it because usually kind of by this point in a tour, I've pretty much finished the book and handed it in. But this year, just because I've had like such a lot going on and like all the Netflix stuff, I'm not as far through as I normally would be. So I could tell you there is another book. It's kind of got quite gothic vibes. It's sort of maybe going back to a bit more kind of Mrs. Westaway territory. It's a family mystery. But that's all I can say at the moment.
Well, we'll take it. Thank you.
Let's give one more round of applause for Ruth Ware. All right, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. Just a reminder, there's one of me and a lot of you, so just be patient with me. We'll start over on this side of the room, so if you have a question, again, just raise your hand and I'll come around with a mic.
Don't be shy.
Anyone?
Sorry, I already asked all the questions, I guess.
Yeah, there are no questions left.
Thank you so much, Ruth and Amanda, for the lovely chat. I will say I was living in London when the pandemic broke out, and your books got me through the pandemic, so thank you on that count. And I'm wondering, one of the things that draws me so much to your books, and the books of many of your colleagues in this genre, is that they're almost sort of sociological studies of Britishness, and British life, and British people, and British culture. And I'm wondering if that's ever something that you consciously take into account when you're writing, if you ever think of your books as some sort of exploration of British life, or a critique, perhaps, of British life, if that ever factors into your writing.
Wow, what a great question. I absolutely love that. I have never seen my books as a kind of exploration of British life in that sense, except insofar as I am British. But I guess the funny thing is, when I was writing my first thriller, In a Dark, Dark Wood, I was kind of quite keenly aware of the fact that it was quite British, and quite not worried about it exactly, because it was always the book that I wanted to write. But I think I just thought that that would mean it would have quite a limited appeal, because I could imagine it selling in the UK. I thought, all my friends would buy it, and hopefully my mother-in-law, because she's very supportive. And in fact, she's the perfect mother-in-law, because she buys all my books but doesn't read them, which is the exact right thing for a mother-in-law to do. So thank you very much, Eileen. We appreciate your work. But yeah, I sort of thought, who on earth outside of the UK has ever heard of a hen night? It's such a weird thing. And of course it turns out every culture in the world has a version of a hen night. They just call it something else. But I suppose as I have gone on writing and my books have sold in other countries, very happily in America, but also, I think Cabin 10 is published in something like 44 countries. It's gone literally all over the world. I guess I have become a bit more aware of the fact that I'm in some ways explaining Britishness to people who won't necessarily understand some of the references, some of the things that are going on. And there's always one of the complaints I hear from other British writers who are published in America is often that they're really heavily required to translate their books. Like, all the vocabulary is changed, all the rubbish bins become garbage cans, and, all the pavements become sidewalks. And I have to say, my publishers have always been incredible about that. They've always really left it up to me to decide, is this going to be really confusing and it's worth, putting in a line just to contextualize, or is this just kind of just part of the flavor of my books? And mostly I lean to the fact that it's just, you're reading my books because I'm a British author, so maybe you enjoy the British vocabulary. So I'm very grateful to my publishers for letting me always make that decision for me.
Ruth and Amanda, if you look to your left, main floor, way back.
First of all, thank you to the Midtown Scholar again for bringing some of the biggest authors to our small city here. It's lovely to be able to have folks like Ruth Ware and all the others here, so thank you very much. Ruth, you were, first of all, also, I have some of my book club here that we are enjoying our next book club book. One Perfect Couple was a recent one as well. You recently had the opportunity to put your blurbs, your public relations to paper a couple of years ago, both by appearing on the All About Agatha podcast with Kemper Donovan, and also being a part of the short story collection for Agatha Christie. So I wonder, being called the Agatha Christie of our generation, do you feel like your writing and your thought process has changed since stepping into her shoes as a part of that collection with your contemporaries, or do you find still your own voice both in that collection and afterwards?
Oh, good question. First of all, I obviously love the comparison with Agatha Christie. I'm a big fan of hers, so any kind of opportunity to hear our names in the same breath is very flattering to me. I don't think it's at all changed my writing. I think she changed me as a writer, but that happened much, much longer ago. You know, Christie was probably one of the first kind of proper crime novelists that I read. Not the first, actually. The first crime story that I can remember ever reading, if you don't count sort of Nancy Drew and things like that, was Sherlock Holmes's The Speckled Band. And I found it so terrifying, I did not sleep for a week. But definitely Agatha Christie was one of the first sort of adult crime novelists that I read, and I think she really, really imprinted on me the sort of the shape of a crime novel, you know, the way to scatter the clues, the way to play fair with the reader. I think I didn't really realise when I was writing in a ... Wood how much I had kind of absorbed from her as the sort of platonic ideal of the crime novel. But no, I've never deliberately sort of moulded my style to her. It was other people who made the comparison. And actually, when I was writing in a ... Wood, I think I thought I was writing much more in the vein of sort of horror movies. You know, like I always want to say Wes Anderson, but he's the Pastel Hotel Wes Craven, that's what I mean. That sort of thing. And Gillian Flynn and people like that, you know, for sure, because I was writing a psychological thriller. But Christie would 100% not have occurred to me as a comparison. But I was hugely flattered to be asked to contribute to the Miss Marple anthology, which was amazing fun and was actually one of the things that influenced me to want to write The Woman in Suite 11, because I loved so much walking into a world that was already kind of populated with characters and settings and familiar faces. And of course it was super daunting taking on Christie's work, because, you know, Christie files are really, really, they love their Christie. And I was A, terrified of making a blooper, but B, obviously, like, you know, you are inviting comparisons with someone who is the best in their field, which is always daunting. But I just enjoyed the whole process so much, and it made me think I would love to do that with my own work. I would love to go back to some of the characters that I've really enjoyed.
Poirot or Marple?
Oh, I mean, always Marple. I love Poirot. But if I had to choose individual novels, some of the Poirot novels are absolutely my favourite. But Marple as a character, I mean, she's a kick-ass old lady who stabs people with her knitting needles.
So many things I want to ask you, but first, want to say I refuse to go on a cruise now after reading your novel, and I do appreciate so much your contribution to the Miss Marple anthology. I'm a Christie truist, and I've really enjoyed that. But my question is, when you need a cozy kind of disassociate from everything kind of read, are there authors or genres that you tend to kind of gravitate to when you need that, break from maybe thriller or detective?
So also just to say, my husband, who is a virologist, also refuses to go on a cruise. But his reasoning is because he says they are hotbeds of norovirus. So I'm sure you wanted to know that, but you're in good company. So, well, it's funny. So actually, I would say Christie is my biggest comfort read. And one of the things that I love to do most when I'm really stressed is listen to her on audiobook. David Suchet and the guy who plays Captain Hastings, whose name momentarily escapes me, do amazing audiobook readings that are just so immersive. And because I know the plot, I can sort of completely not quite switch off, because they still occupy that overthinking part of my brain, but I sort of don't have to concentrate to follow them. So that is my number one, the world is too much, I need something in my head that is not my thought way of switching off. But when I kind of want to completely escape and just read something that's totally unrelated to crime and thriller, I adore historical fiction. One of my favourite authors is Patrick O'Brien, who does the Jack Aubrey novels, the Master and Commander series. I love non-fiction. I read a lot of non-fiction in between novels. I love science fiction. I'm if I say I'm extremely widely read, that makes me sound like I'm very up my own arse, and I don't mean it that way, but I will read all genres, put it that way.
Yes, front row. Do you want to try a pass the mic situation?
It's coming from behind you, don't worry.
Oops, wrong end. Okay, so you're wildly successful, obviously.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, we're all here tonight for you. And you make it look easy, and maybe it was, but you've also, in your bio, there were a lot of other careers that seem to have predated this one. So my question is, what was the journey to get to where you are now? Was it as easy as you make it look, or how, and what was the moment when you realized that this was what you were meant to do and that you knew you had made it? So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
What a lovely question, and thank you for the very kind words at the beginning. I will say that almost all of the hard work in this kind of endeavour is done by my publishers. I literally just sit in a room, listen to the weird characters in my head and write them down. So in that respect, it is easy. You know, writers love to complain on social media about what a tough gig it is. And, you know, there are some difficult aspects of it, but let's be honest, it's not, you know, being a nurse in an ICU unit or going down the coal mines or any job that, you know, requires actual sort of hard graft. But having said all of that, it was not always easy as a journey. And I think for a long time, my biggest enemy was myself. So I've always been someone who wrote. I've always written right from when I was a little girl, and I've been writing novels since I was in my teens. But for a long time, I never tried to get them published. So we didn't know anyone who worked in the creative industries. You know, when the school I went to wasn't the kind of place that had authors coming in to sort of talk about their careers. So I never really saw it as something that a kind of regular, ordinary person could do. And so I kept writing all the way through my teens, all the way through my 20s, but I always loved books, and that's how I ended up working in the publishing industry, which was both incredibly, you know, it was amazing because I got to work with all of these brilliant authors and got to work with books, but it really contributed to my stage fright. So I was working with all these kind of, you know, incredible household names, and then sort of going home and tapping out my own, in comparison, very rubbish stories on the computer in my spare room. And I think it could have continued like that pretty much forever had I not had my kids. And, you know, there's a lot said about, you know, having children and, you know, the pram in the hall and all that as being the enemy of good art. But I think if I had not had my kids, I probably wouldn't be sitting here now. And the reason was because I was on maternity leave with my second child, and I had this idea for a plot that I really wanted to write. And I suddenly realised I am not going to be able to do this unless I make my writing pay, because in a few months I'm going to be back at work in this very demanding job. I don't have enough money for extra childcare. Unless I find a way to make money out of my writing, I'm going to have to stop doing this until my kids are much, much older. And it was that kind of use it or lose it moment. I thought, I have to take this seriously. I have to start writing with a view to publication instead of writing just for myself. And I have to face up to my fear of rejection and just sub it to people. And so I wrote the book. I sent it out to a bunch of agents. Obviously, they all rejected it. But this time I didn't put it back under the bed. I went back, I edited it, I showed it to friends, I joined a writers group and got critiques from them. And I just kept plugging and plugging and plugging away until eventually I met the woman who is still my agent today, who took me on, signed me, and here we are. So I'm very grateful to my kids and for all those sleepless nights.
Ruth, to your left.
Hello. My question is, how long do you take between novels, and do you kind of always have a list of ones that you want to write, or are there times that it's hard to come up with a new concept?
For anyone who can't see this, the lovely speaker is hiding on the stairs, so it's like a disembodied voice. So I'm pretty monogamous in terms of writing. Well, actually, I should just say I'm pretty monogamous full stop, just in case my husband is. But yeah, in terms of my books, I have like one book that I'm writing at any time. I know other people who can have multiple projects on the go. That is not me. I have to immerse myself in something. And I very, very rarely give up on an idea until I've got to the end of it. Once or twice I've kind of got to a point in a book where I've thought this isn't working, but I've always found a way to sort of turn it around. One of them was One by One. I got about probably about a third of the way into that book. So I've written 30,000 words, which is a painful chunk of words to say goodbye to. And I sent it to my agent and I said, I'm not sure if this is working. And I was really hoping that she would come back to me and say, no, darling, you're being very silly. It's wonderful. But she didn't. She said, no, I think you're right. It's not working. And I had to figure out why it wasn't working and fix it, which turned out to be because I told it from the wrong point of view. So I had to go back and introduce a second narrator and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, all of which to say, I take about a year to write a book. But I spend a long time thinking about it beforehand, kind of thinking about the characters, thinking about the plot, thinking about the setting. So I'm always thinking 1 or 2 books ahead of the one that I'm writing, but I never set pen to paper until I sit down and write that kind of first scene or that first page. And I'm not someone who's typically boiling over with ideas. I have lots of thoughts in my head, lots of kind of what ifs and anxieties, but I don't start kind of fleshing them out into a plot until the point when I think, what am I going to write next? And that's when I sort of start drawing on that sort of bank of swirling insecurities and problems. So yeah, I don't know if that's a very good answer. I always wish I was kind of one of those quote-unquote proper writers who has a writer's notebook that's filled with, potential plots. But that's not me. I only seem to be able to kind of hold stuff in my head and hope that when I send the bucket down the well, there's something there waiting at the bottom.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm fairly new compared to probably a lot of people in this room to your work. I did read The Woman in Cabin 10 and enjoyed it thoroughly, and that's why I'm here. But I was wondering, what is of all of your books, even the ones that maybe you wrote early on that never did get published, what's your favorite one of your books?
What's my favourite? So I get asked this question quite a lot, and I always give the same answer, which is that it's a bit like being asked to choose my favourite kid. They're all my babies. They're all special.
But doesn't everyone have one?
Favourite kid or favourite book? But no, and it sounds like a cliche, but genuinely, there are things that I love about all of my books. And actually, the ones that I guess I feel more protective of the ones that are less popular with other people sometimes. It's sort of, it's like your kid who's having a tough time at school, and it sort of brings out the mama bear in you. But no, that, like In a Dark, Dark Wood, I guess, was my first book, so that will always be my baby. But I guess this is probably true of most writers, the one that you sort of feel most protective over and the most invested in is always the one that you're writing. And for me, part of being a writer is letting go. So you nurture this project for a year, these characters live in your head, you love them, but you have to let go. You have to send that book off to your agent and have enough kind of critical distance to be able to chop it up and edit it and be brutal and then release it into the world where people are hopefully going to love it, but you can guarantee a lot of them are going to give it 1-star reviews as well. And the way to do that is to move on. It's to start a new book, to have that book be your baby. And so, so I guess that's my honest answer, is my favourite book is always the one that I'm writing.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hello. So speaking of letting go, on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult was it to hand over Lo and her story to a screenwriter?
Oh, what a great question. I don't know. So I feel like I have two equally true but completely contradictory answers. In some ways, obviously it's difficult, and that's partly why I chose to not be super involved with the production. You know, a lot of my books have been optioned, and often the first question they ask is, do you want to write the screenplay? You know, how involved do you want to be? And so far, I have always said, I don't want to. Particularly with Cabin 10, because it's a movie, not a TV series, that requires a lot of condensation. It requires a lot of chopping characters, you know, removing plot lines, removing descriptions. And I just didn't think I would have the necessary brutality for that, you know, and it's your book, it's your baby. And partly I just wasn't sure that I would be that good at it. You know, I wanted the screenplay to be written by someone who had written a lot of screenplays and was great at it. And I feel like I know how to write a novel. I'm not sure I know how to write a screenplay. So in some ways, I was very happy to sort of hand that over to the frankly incredible team of people who are working on it at Netflix. And I think that was one of the things that I had not realized until I went on set was, you know, it's a real cliche that it takes a village to create a book. I think every author puts that in their acknowledgements at some point. And, you know, all the people who work on it, your editor and your copy editor and the people in production who make it look beautiful and the designer who does the cover and blah, blah, blah. All of that is true. But it's not until I went on a film set that I realized that the publishing industry absolutely pales into comparison with the film industry. You know, it's like watching a hive of ants all zooming around, doing their own jobs, looking completely chaotic, but somehow all kind of making it work. And I think at that moment, I just felt incredibly grateful that I had written something that people cared about enough to work so hard to create something that will be different, but hopefully just as fun, and people will take to their hearts just as much. So yeah, it was a bit like waving my baby off to nursery for the first time and saying, please take care of them. But at the same time, you know, as with seeing your child grow and do their own thing, you feel kind of sense of pride. So.
One last question. Thank you so much for being here. This has been amazing. In talking about how you write your books, I know you said you stick to one at a time, and you also mentioned Lisa Jewell's process of not knowing an ending, which I also thought was like very surprising when I heard her speak to that. Another thing, her daily routine is kind of, she sets an amount of words she's going to bang out in one day, and then when she's done with the 1,500, she's done. I would like to know what your kind of like, your schedule is like for writing.
What my routine is. So another difference, basically Lisa and I are polar opposites in pretty much everything apart from the fact that we write in the same genre. I don't write by word counts. Partly because I think that what's more important is that if you have a good day's work and your book is better at the end of it than it was at the beginning, and that can mean deleting 500 crap words. Like that can be as good a day's work as writing 500 brilliant words. Removing a scene that isn't working can be just as good a day's work, even though you end up, you know, 2,000 words down compared to where you were yesterday. So I don't word count. I just try and kind of move the story on in some way and leave the book better than it was when I started. And that could mean deleting 500 words, it could mean writing 7,000 words. That remains my best day's writing ever. 7,500 words. I've never topped that. I did feel slightly sick after that. So I don't have a routine in that sense, but what I do have is a kind of routine that was forced on me by my kids, which is to say that when I am naturally a night owl. So when I started writing I was doing it, you know, in the evenings after work and when my kids were asleep. So my happy place has always been writing in bed on my laptop, kind of curled up with my duvet. ideally after the whole rest of the house is asleep, so I'm kind of have my, time to myself. Turns out when your kids turn into toddlers, and particularly toddlers who don't sleep, that is not a practical way to write, and it's also very bad for your back. So I now do not write in bed anymore after my back is completely screwed. I have a proper desk set up. I have like a fancy chair, and my work in progress lives only on that computer, so I am not tempted to tinker with it on the sofa, or, I'm not someone who can write in cafes and so on. But what I've always done, and what I still do, even though my kids are now much older, is I, wave them off to whatever they're doing for the day, get down to work, and I try to work pretty much sort of 9 until 3. And now they're often not home then. My eldest is at university, so he's not home at all. But that still seems to be just about when my kind of creative stamina runs out, and I start to think, right, I need to go and do something else because my brain is fried. And yeah, so that's kind of my writing day, and then I'll do other things. It won't necessarily all be writing. It will be doing my VAT return, or doing social media, or all the other business. I mean, writers are a small business, so all the admin of running a small business around it. But yeah, that's my routine, is kind of 9 to 3, and try to leave my work in a better place than when I started.
Do you do your own social media?
I do, yeah. People often, message me or tweet me and say, I know Ruth will never read this. And I think, I am still stacking my own dishwasher. If I'm going to delegate something, it would be doing the washing up, not answering tweets. So, yeah.
We have run out of time, so can we give one more round of applause for Ruth Ware? Thank you to Amanda. Thank you to Ruth. Congratulations. The Woman in Suite 11 now available. We're going to have a book signing with Ruth in the Rare Books building next door. Go out the doors, take a left, form a line. Thanks again for coming out, everyone. Have a good night.
Oh, for goodness sake. It doesn't like it. It likes it down there. relevant